and welcome back to One Plant Short of Crazy. I'm Crystal, and today we are going to go through my soil mix. So I talk a lot in some of the previous videos about the best soil mix to use to offer a really good airy mix for your plants. So keep in mind before we get started that this mix is for anything and everything other than cactus and succulents. For cacti and succulents, we'll do a different video and we'll talk about all of those. But today we're going to talk about this soil mix that I use on 95% of my plants. It is amazing. Not only that, but today I got a couple extra goodies that we're going to be adding in, and we're going to be spicing up my mix even more. So to talk about what we have here, on the far right of my right, we have some charcoal, and you can pick it up and you can see clear as day. It's nice and black all over the place. What the charcoal will do is the charcoal will help with any added moisture in the soil. It'll soak it up. Additionally, the charcoal will help with some pests and fungus and stuff like that. It'll help all around with root rot and everything. The next thing that we have is we have some perlite, so a whole entire bag. Perlite is just completely white and powdery. When you put it in, make sure that you turn your face away because you're gonna get a poof of perlite cloud in your face, and it's not fun. It makes you sneeze and it's just sticky. The next bag that we have here is we've got my orchid mix. Now I want to point out a couple things here. This is Miracle Grow, and Miracle Grow sometimes comes with fungus gnat larvae in it. So kind of one of those things where it's hit and miss. You may find a bag that's totally fine. You may find a bag that has some larvae. So one of the things that I do is when I pot up my plants, I like to put just a little bit of cinnamon on the top of the soil there in case there's any larvae in there. They hatch, they get in the cinnamon, they die. So really good one just to have, but I don't care about Miracle Grow. In all honesty, if you have house plants, more than likely you're gonna have at least one or two gnats, especially if you propagate any moss for propagation. Sphagnum moss as well as cocoa coir holds moisture in the top. Cocoa coir tends to dry a little bit quicker, so it's not as susceptible to pests, but sphagnum moss is. I use sphagnum moss on a lot of my plants for propagating. Not only that, I use it on my orchids. So unfortunately, I do have a little bit of gnats on my moss upstairs. Drives my husband crazy. But I just tackled it. I went through and put some cinnamon all on the top layer last night. Woke up this morning, no gnats flying around. So it's great. All right, back to the potting soil mix. The next one that we have is just a basic potting soil. So for any of you that follow my channel, you know that this right here is my trio. I call it my 1/3 mix. 1/3 perlite, 1/3 orchid bark, and 1/3 potting soil. But today we're going to be adding in some extra goodies into our soil to make sure that when I split my plants for our next video, they have a wonderful chance to just thrive, flourish, and grow like crazy. So for that, we are going to put just a tiny bit of fertilizer in here. So this is Lily Miller, and it's a 10-10-10 fertilizer. This one is actually really good for vegetable gardens as well. So if you have any vegetable gardens, what you do is you just put about 1 tablespoon around each plant that you have. Water, it goes down. If you can mix it in the soil just a little bit, that's great too. But this works really well as a fertilizer for pretty much all of our plants, except orchids. They have a different one. So we're gonna add in just a little bit of this, and we'll talk about it when we do our mix. And then the next one is my favorite, and I was so excited because last time I went to Lowe's, they didn't have this. This time they did. So this is Star Green. And these are worm castings. So essentially it's worm poop. When the worms go through, they just have a big old pile of dirt. They let the worms live in it, and then they take the worms out and they collect all of the worm poop. It is fantastic. So for this one here, you can use this also in your outside gardens. You sprinkle right on the top, maybe mix in just a tiny bit, and then when you water, it goes down. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna add a little bit into our soil. Now, per plant, you're looking at about 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch putting this if it's outside. So I'm going to try to kind of gauge how much that would be in this container. This is a 64 quart container. Each one of the bags for my 333, these are 8 quarts. So we're going to have 24 quarts in. And with that, I can probably pot up about 5 or 6 plants. So I'm going to do just a couple handfuls of each of these and put it in and just kind of gauge it a little bit. You do want to be careful with the 10-10-10. You can over fertilize, so I'm going to be gentle with this one, especially because the bags generally come with fertilizer. So I'm just adding a tiny bit more. So we're going to go through the mix here and we're going to put it together and get it nice and fluffy. So for the first one, I always do perlite first. The reason, again, I do not want a perlite cloud puff going into my face. So we will just tear, and most of these bags you don't need scissors, however I bring them because sometimes I can't rip them or I rip them wrong. But we're just going to tear this one open right at the spot. We're going to take this, and instead of just dumping it upside down, I like to avoid the cloud puff if I can. So I'm going to start on one side. Oh, there it goes. And I'm just going to kind of let it go down here. So there we go. Woo! See? Nice little puffs. That's the perlite cloud. You don't want that in your face. It's nasty. All right, so I'm just going to kind of make this even in here so that when I mix it, I can pull it up and I can mix it really nice. This is the fun part. My husband gives me a bad time because my fingernails are always nasty. Let's just put it this way. I wash my hair to get the dirt out of my fingers. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the orchid bark. And I like to put this in before the soil. It's chunky. It likes to mix really well. This is just how I mix it. So we'll see if I can break this one. Nope, we're going to use the scissors. I don't want to have a bunch of different pieces. So here we go. All right. Here we go on this one. Again, I'm just going to start on the side and I'm going to work my way back. Perfect. We're going to kind of spread this out. I want you guys to see how chunky this orchid bark is. I mean, I am talking about bark. That is simply all this is. It's fantastic. This offers a very good aeration to your soil. The first two components of this, that's all it's for. This is supposed to help your plants grow in a pot with soil and avoid root rot because the moisture is not going to hold in the soil as much as it does with just potting soil. So adding in the perlite and the bark really makes a nice, beautiful mix. So we're just going to kind of flatten this out here a little bit and have some layers. The next thing I'm going to do before I add in my potting soil is I'm going to add some charcoal. Since this is a really big one, I'm just going to use the last of my charcoal. I have some dried up moss in here too. Just put it in the bed behind me. This is probably about 3 cups worth of charcoal. So I'm just going to sprinkle it right on top of my orchid bark. There we go. So now we have some charcoal in there. The next thing, again, before we add the soil, we're going to put this. So right now we're going to do the 10-10-10. And you want to repeat this about once every 6 months. You can add this onto the top layer of your soil like I was talking about in water. Just like mix it in a tiny, tiny bit with your fingers, get them in there. And this will keep your soil really nice for your plants because most soil that you get from the store, it has a fertilizer life of approximately 6 months. So if you add this every 6 months, just do about 1 tablespoon per pot. So you do not want to add more than that because you don't want to over fertilize and damage your plant. But for this one here, I'm just going to do a couple handfuls. So I'll show you what it looks like inside. It's got a bunch of little granules and different things like that. So we've got a nice little mix here. And I'm just going to gently grab a couple handfuls and just spread it in. Like I said, I'm going to have about 5 5 or 6 plants that I'll be able to pot out of this, maybe a little more, it depends on the size. So we'll do one more handful. Sounds kind of cool when you drop it in on the charcoal. And that's it. We're just going to close that one. I don't want to do any more in this soil mix. Before we do the potting soil, we'll add one last ingredient, which will be our worm castings. So I'm going to stick my hand in worm poop. It's going to be great. All right. It's all right. It's just like when you go fishing and you get worm ick all over you when you put them on the hooks. All right. Oh, this looks so good. Look how deep and dark that soil is. So let's read this. It is organic matter for better soil, and it says Staw green earthworm castings are made with 100% earthworm manure. We never cheapen our product with low-cost fillers of any kind. Okay, I'm not going to read all of it, but basically that just means this is all worm poop. I'm sticking my hand in. Oh yeah. So I'm just going to dust this down. And we're just going to put one layer over my entire area. This stuff you can use as much as you want. I'm not going to pour the whole bag though. I just want a thin layer here. Nice. Doesn't smell or anything. It's nothing like that. But it's essentially, I mean, we have worms in our gardens outside. They do nice for them. I know in my garden, if I find worms anywhere outside of the garden, I'll grab them and throw them in. All right, we're almost done. We've got 1 or 2 more passes here. So we're just gonna cover this up, and then you can see through the clear on the side there, the different layers that we have. There we go. Last pass. And then we'll get our hands in it and start mixing it up. All right. So that looks great. I've got all my worm castings that I want. And for the worm castings, for your pots that are inside, you can do this every 3 months. So every 3 months, if you want to sprinkle just a little bit of worm castings on top of your plants for a little extra fertilizer, little extra goodness, just do so. Sprinkle a little bit around your plant, water it, it'll go straight down into the soil and it'll do all sorts of wonderful things. So I'm gonna throw that piece of moss back by my hibiscus. All right. Lastly, we've got our potting soil. So we're just gonna take our potting soil, the last of our 3-3-3 mix. I'm gonna cut this one, I don't even wanna try. There we go. Now you can either use potting soil or you can use cactus soil. I'm gonna tell you the difference. If you really like to take care of your plants too much, and what I mean is you just water it all the time, you love it all the time, you mist it all the time, you just give it all sorts of moisture. If you're gonna do that, instead of using potting soil, I recommend that you use cactus soil. Cactus soil is going to dry a little bit easier in between your mistings, your waterings, your everything that you do when you're playing with your plants. Whereas this one here is going to take a little bit longer to dry out. So if you're somebody that's really good at just watering your plants when they're dry, I talk about the feel test all the time. Pick up the plant. If the plant feels like you can throw it over your shoulders very easily by picking it up, water it. Take it to the sink. Soak it completely until about 15% of the water is coming out of the bottom. But for me, I let my plants dry out very well in between waterings, so I prefer to use potting soil. So we're just going to add this in, starting from one side, making it all the way over. There we go. Get all that goodness out. And now comes my favorite part. I love playing with dirt. So what I'm going to do is the easiest way to mix without making a mess and really getting it is you start by the corners and just take your hands and bring the bottom up. So each one, I'm just flipping it. I'm going underneath and I'm flipping it up. Underneath and flipping it up. And I might add one more bit of potting soil. We'll see when it's done mixing. I don't think I'll need to. I normally don't. I just want this container full. But I don't have more orchid bark or perlite, so if I add more soil in it, it's gonna be, yeah, we won't add. So taking again, bringing up. You can also add leca to your mix. You can add sphagnum moss to your mix too, just a tiny bit. If you add leca is just gonna add another type of substrate in there that's gonna allow for it to dry out a little bit quicker and not hold on to the moisture. So I love leca for propagating. I also like it for potting soil. You can also use perlite for propagating as well. Sometimes as long as you just have perlite in a container with drainage holes at the bottom, it works just the same as leca, sphagnum moss, any of those. So whatever you have handy, whether it be moss, pure water in a container, leca, perlite. You could even do a little bit of propagation just with bark, because bark does not hold the excess moisture as much, so you don't have to worry about your stems. But for this potting soil mix is absolutely amazing. I actually use this for my vanilla orchid as well. So even though I said orchids, I use sphagnum moss normally. I'll either use sphagnum moss or orchid bark, or a mixture of the two. But what's great about my vanilla orchid is the vanilla orchid is more of a viney orchid. It's the only orchid that actually produces vanilla beans. Fun fact, with vanilla orchids, the only way that you can pollinate them is by hand. So that is actually why real vanilla is extremely expensive, and that's why the stuff at the store that we generally buy is fake. It's actually made out of beaver's butt glands. But yeah, they use the beaver's butt gland for vanilla flavoring because the real vanillas are so super hard. So this soil mix though is great for those too. This is wonderful for pothos, philodendrons, scindapsus, monsteras, basically anything. I use it for my wandering Jews. I use it for my dumb cane. I use it for my Hoyas. I mean, pretty much if you can think of it, I use it for it. So this is looking really good. So when we have it mixed, it's gonna look like a little snowy pile with dirt and bark. So you can see there's a beautiful, nice mix. All right, I think I've got it. Ooh, we got a couple pieces to break up. So if you see some extra soil clumps in there, break them up. You don't want to have one big old clump of soil in your mix in your pot, because that one clump of soil can hold a little too much moisture. So just kind of break it up. All right. So there you have it. This is my favorite soil mix in the world, and we have just added all sorts of goody goodness in there that's going to make our plants thrive. So my next video, I'll be coming back here in just a minute because I got to start potting, and we're going to split up some plants and put some mixed pots together. So I definitely want to thank all of you guys for joining me today. Just a short little video on my soil mix, and I look forward to having you guys visit on the next one. Thank you again. As always, I am one plant short of crazy.